The cold wind bit Maria's cheeks as she climbed the rocky path for the last time. At 32, she was leaving behind more than her native village, perched like an egret on the austere slopes of the Pico de Orizaba mountains. She was abandoning an entire segment of her existence, a tightly woven fabric of ancestral customs, immutable traditions, and powerful family ties. In her worn bag she carried not only a few personal belongings and the meager savings from the discreet sale of her jewelry, but also a persistent dream, that of a better future glittering far away in the United States of America. Maria had always had a traveler's soul, a spirit too vast for the familiar horizons of her village. She had devoured the rare books and magazines that reached her, soaking up images of a different world, vibrant and full of possibilities. The stories of the few men from the village who had returned from the United States of America for holidays fascinated her. Their words spoke of luminous cities, well-paid jobs, and a freedom unknown here, where the weight of tradition dictated every aspect of a woman's life. Here, her destiny was sealed from birth, an arranged marriage, a home to keep, children to raise. An honorable life, certainly, but one that stifled the spark of independence burning within her. She had watched her cousins, her friends, resign themselves to this path, their youthful dreams gradually fading under the yoke of obligations. Maria refused this fate. She aspired to choose her own way, to discover her own limits, to build her own story. Her plan had matured in secret, fueled by frustration and hope. She had closely observed the preparations of the rare villagers who left to try their luck abroad. Gathering information, saving penny by penny, patiently weaving her escape. The hardest part had been keeping her secret. Smiling at allusions to the future husband her family intended for her, and feigning indifference to the village women's gossip. The night before, she had silently said goodbye to her mother, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the heartbreak gripping her daughter's heart. She had hugged her little brother, whispering promises of returns laden with gifts. The pain of leaving her family was sharp and throbbing, but it was tempered by the profound conviction that this departure was necessary, vital for her own survival. The bus rattled along the winding roads, carrying her inexorably away from her village. Maria watched the familiar landscape unfold, the silver olive trees, the stone houses clinging to the mountain, the deep blue of the sea in the distance. Each element was a part of her, a deep root she was tearing out with silent suffering. Upon arrival in Algiers, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The city, noisy and bustling, was a striking contrast to the quietude of her village. She found refuge in a small, modest hotel frequented by other hopefuls seeking a new life. There she met women from other regions, also carrying their hopes and fears. Their similar stories created a fragile but comforting bond. The wait for the visa had been long and agonizing, punctuated by complex administrative procedures and restless nights. Every phone call, every letter received, brought either hope or disillusionment. Finally, the precious authorization arrived, a thin sheet of paper opening the doors to a new world. The journey had been an ordeal. The close quarters and the uncertainty of the next day severely tested her determination. But the image of the United States of America, the promised land of her dreams, kept her afloat. Disembarking in El Paso, Maria was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of sensations, the unfamiliar language resonating around her, the different architecture, the frantic pace of life. She felt minuscule and lost in the anonymous crowd. Fortunately, she had the address of a distant cousin who had left a few years earlier. The train ride to the small town where her cousin lived was long and silent. Maria watched the landscape pass the green fields, the picturesque villagers trying to decipher the conversations of the other passengers. Arriving at her cousin's house was a relief. Renata welcomed her with warmth and compassion, understanding the courage it had taken Maria to undertake the journey. The first months in the United States of America were difficult. The language barrier was a major obstacle, making job hunting arduous and social integration slow. Maria cycled through precarious odd jobs, cleaning, washing dishes in restaurants, childcare. Each task was exhausting, but she performed them with fierce determination, aware that every dollar earned brought her closer to independence. American culture was different, sometimes confusing. The freedom women enjoyed here was both exhilarating and intimidating for Maria. Little by little, she learned the social codes, the customs, and the subtleties of an individualistic society where community ties were less prominent than in her village. The absence of her family was sometimes cruelly felt, especially during holidays or moments of solitude. Phone calls were rare and expensive. Letters took time to arrive, bringing news of the village, the joys and sorrows of those she had left behind. Yet Maria did not regret her choice. She felt she was growing, discovering unexpected strengths within herself. She learned English, made a few friends, kind co-workers who admired her tenacity. She explored the city, visited museums, and walked in the parks, marveling at the beauty and diversity of this new world. Over the years, Maria forged her own path. She took courses, found a stable job in a garment company, putting her manual dexterity to good use. She rented a small apartment, a space all her own, a symbol of her autonomy. She learned to manage her money, make her own decisions, and live by her own rules. From time to time, she returned to the village. The reunions were always charged with emotion, joy, and a few awkward silences. She felt the questioning gaze of the elders, the curiosity of the young women. She had defied tradition, and her success, even modest, was a form of silent challenge to the established norms. Maria had not denied her origins, but she had refused to be confined to a destiny that was not hers. She had paid the price of her audacity with solitude and displacement, but she had gained something far more precious, the freedom to be herself, to build her own life, far from the mountains of her childhood, under the sky of the United States of America that had finally adopted her. Hers was the story of a brave woman who listened to her heart and who found, at the end of a long journey, a future only she had dared to dream of. The years continued to roll by, weaving a new thread into Maria's existence. Her English had become flawless, to the point where she now thought and dreamed in the language. Her circle of friends had expanded, including colleagues, neighbors, and people met during her evening classes. She had discovered the pleasure of going to the cinema, browsing bookstores, and picnicking by the park. Houston, where she had eventually moved to seize better professional opportunities in the fashion sector, had become her city, a kaleidoscope of cultures and ideas where she finally felt she belonged. Her work as a seamstress had evolved. Her talent and creativity were noticed, and she now worked in a design studio, contributing to the making of unique pieces for independent boutiques. She loved the rhythm of the studio, the clicking of sewing machines, the rustle of fabrics, and the camaraderie of the other artisans. She felt valued for her expertise and her unique perspective. The ties with her family remained complex but unbroken. She regularly called her mother, telling her about her Texan life, sometimes omitting the difficulties and emphasizing her successes. She sent money to help with daily expenses. Her returns to the village became less frequent, but always carried a palpable emotion. She observed the changes, the timid modernizations, but also the permanence of traditions. She felt both familiar and foreign, a bridge between two worlds. During one of her stays in the village, she sensed a subtle shift in the eyes of the young women. They watched her with a mixture of admiration and envy, asking timid questions about her life in the United States, about the freedom she enjoyed. Maria then realized that her departure, her audacity, had perhaps sown seeds of hope in the hearts of those who secretly dreamed of a different future. She also saw acquaintances her age, married, often with young children, their faces marked by fatigue and responsibilities. Their conversations revolved around daily worries and family constraints. Maria then measured the distance she had traveled, the sacrifices made, but also the chance she had had to follow her own path. One day, she met a man. Theodore was a passionate photographer, sensitive and open-minded. Their relationship developed slowly, built on intellectual exchanges, walks in Houston, and cultural discoveries. He admired her courage, her inner strength, her unique view of the world. With him, Maria discovered a form of intimacy and sharing she had never known before. He did not seek to change her, but to understand her history and her roots. Their relationship brought a new dimension to her Texan life. She felt less alone, more grounded. Theodore encouraged her to explore her creativity, to exhibit her own fashion designs, inspired by her Mexican roots but revisited with a contemporary sensibility. Her first exhibitions met with modest but encouraging success. Maria finally felt herself flourishing fully, realizing a part of her dreams. Despite this new fulfillment, the connection to her native village remained an essential part of her identity. She continued to follow the news, worrying about her family. She had contributed financially to the construction of a small house for her mother, a symbolic gesture of her attachment. One day, her mother announced over the phone that she was not well. Anxiety immediately overwhelmed Maria. Without hesitation, she took leave and booked a plane ticket. The return to the village was filled with poignant sadness. She found her mother weakened, the weight of the years and traditions marked on her face. Those few weeks spent with her mother were a time of deep introspection. Maria measured the gap that had grown between her life and that of her family, but also the unwavering love that united them. She understood that her departure had not been a rejection, but a necessity for her own survival. After her mother's death, Maria felt immense grief, but also a sense of duty fulfilled. She had honored her memory by remaining true to her own aspirations, by living a dignified and independent life. Back in Texas, she resumed her work with new determination. She continued to create, exhibit, and share her story through her clothes. She had become a strong, independent woman, proud of her roots and her journey. She had defied customs and traditions, not to deny them, but to build a future on her own terms, proving that one could move away from one's starting point without ever forgetting where one came from. Her story became a whisper of hope for other women, a silent testimony to the power of will and the courage to choose one's own destiny, even far from the mountains of her childhood. The following years brought Maria a sense of serenity and accomplishment. Her design studio gained notoriety, attracting a clientele sensitive to her unique style, blending modern cuts with patterns and embroidery inspired by Mexican craftsmanship. She collaborated with other artists, exploring new forms of expression. Her light-filled Texan apartment became a warm gathering place for friends, artists, and travelers passing through. Her relationship with Theodore evolved into a deep and lasting partnership. They shared an open and curious worldview, traveling together, discovering new cultures, and nurturing their respective passions. Theodore exhibited his photographs in Mexico, capturing the raw beauty of the landscapes and the dignity of the inhabitants, a discreet tribute to Maria's roots. Returns to the village became less painful, imbued with a gentle melancholy. The younger generations looked at her with a mix of respect and fascination. Some young women now dared to speak to her about their own aspirations and dreams of independence. Maria shared her experience cautiously, without idealizing her journey. Aware of the difficulties and sacrifices it involved, she emphasized the importance of education, financial autonomy, and female solidarity. One day, she was invited to speak at a small conference organized by an association for immigrant women in Texas. Telling her story in front of an attentive audience was a powerful and moving experience. She spoke of her departure, her difficulties, her successes, but above all, the strengths she drew from her identity and her desire for freedom. Her testimony resonated with many women present, who had also come from diverse backgrounds, carrying the weight of distance and the hope for a better life. Maria understood that her individual journey had taken on a collective dimension, that she had, despite herself, become a symbol of emancipation for some. This realization gave her a new motivation, a desire to become more involved, to support initiatives promoting women's autonomy, both in the United States of America and in Mexico. She began organizing sewing workshops for young immigrant women in Texas, passing on her expertise and encouraging them to develop their creativity as a tool for integration and expression. She also financially supported artisanal projects in her native village, contributing to the preservation of traditional know-how and the creation of income for women. The years had etched lines on her face, but her gaze remained sharp and determined. She had learned to navigate between her two worlds, drawing strength from her roots while fully embracing her Texan life. She had not denied her past, but transformed it into a wealth, a source of inspiration for her present and future. One day, as she gazed at the Texas sky from her balcony, she thought back to the 32-year-old girl climbing the rocky path, her heart beating with hope and uncertainty. The road had been long and strewn with obstacles, but she had traveled it with courage and determination. She had defied customs and traditions, not to erase them, but to write her own story, a story of freedom, creativity, and belonging, woven between the mountains of her childhood and the lights of her adopted city. And in the soft breath of the Texan wind, she could still hear the distant echo of her village's songs. A bittersweet melody that continued to resonate deep within her being.